Ukrainian Armed Forces advance in Sumy, occupiers eliminated near Kupiansk, Russian oil refineries defeated. War map on freedom. I'm Lech Borisov. Hello, and let's start our overview of the situation in the Sumy direction. The 225th Separate Assault Regiment shared good news about pushing out the Russian occupiers. They managed to push the enemy back near Novokonstantinovka and Konstantinovka. The regiment added that, despite the unit not operating as a whole and also helping to hold back the enemy in other regions, the assault troops are still managing to advance further. Let's also discuss the situation in the Kupiansk direction. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the situation in Kupiansk and its surroundings is under the control of Ukrainian forces. However, the enemy continues to try to concentrate on the northern outskirts of the city. The Russians are attempting to advance in the area of the settlements of Kontrashaka, Novoselaka, and Novaya Krudlyakivka. The report also emphasizes that the exit from the pipeline, which the enemy used to move personnel, is controlled by Ukrainian defenders. It does not lead directly into the city. Next, let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction. It remains the hottest spot. Here, the Russians carried out a record number of assaults. In addition, the enemy set a record for the number of directions in which they attacked during the day. This was stated by the spokesperson of the Dnipro Operational Strategic Group of Troops, Alexei Belsky. At the same time, he noted that Ukrainian defenders repelled about 50 offensive actions by the Russian Federation. The occupiers are taking losses and retreating. Fighting also continues in the areas of the settlements of Rodinsk, Mykolaievka, Myrolubivka, Novoeconomic, and Udakny. And despite such a massive onslaught, the Russian Federation's army has not been able to break through the defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine. Next, let's talk about the strike on Russian oil refineries deep in the rear. The commander of the Drone Systems Forces, Robert Bravi, also known as Magyar, confirmed the drone strike on the Kirishi oil refinery. According to preliminary reports, explosions occurred on the refinery's grounds as a result of the attack, leading to a large-scale fire. It's worth noting that this refinery is located 800 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. In other words, Ukrainian drones managed to break through the defenses of the Russian Federation. And we'll discuss this in more detail with Dmytro Snyrev, a military and political analyst. Dmytro, hello. The strike on the Kirishi refinery. It's one of the top 5 oil refineries in Russia. Could this lead to a general fuel shortage?
Yes. It's worth noting that its processing capacity exceeds 20 million tons of oil per year, and that makes this facility the second largest refinery in the country after the Omsk plant. It's also important to note that this refinery is the main supplier of petroleum products for St. Petersburg, as well as the Leningrad, Novgorod, and Pskov regions. The facility produces about 80 types of petroleum products, including gasoline and diesel fuel. But the main products are fuel oil and aviation jet fuel, and accordingly, the facility is directly affiliated with the Ministry of Defense of the occupying country. What's notable is that the capacity of this refinery allows the Russian Federation to significantly increase shipments not only within the country. I'm talking about shipments of finished products like gasoline and diesel fuel, but primarily to end consumers. And strikes on this particular refinery could primarily provoke significant social tension within the Russian Federation itself, where several key federal districts already, in fact, regrettably lack the essential ability to function normally due to the current severe shortage of vital fuel and lubricants. And LT, break time equals 0.5s/NGT. Moreover, I should note that, according to the Russian side's own estimates, there is a severe shortage of petroleum products within the country, and the Russian Federation has taken unprecedented measures by purchasing gasoline and diesel fuel from the Republic of Belarus and Kazakhstan precisely to reduce social tension within Russia itself. What's more, this is not the only strike on the largest refineries. Just the other day, Ukrainian defense intelligence drones successfully attacked the significant oil refinery located in Ufa, causing considerable damage. It should be noted that the distance from the line of contact to the Ufa refinery is about 1,400 kilometers. And to the oil processing facility in the Leningrad region, which was attacked by Special Operations Forces drones, it's about 800 kilometers. So, as we can see, these are complex operations carried out by Ukraine's defense forces, Special Operations Forces, and the Defense Intelligence Directorate, aimed at disabling oil refineries in the Russian Federation.
Keith Kellogg noted the capabilities of Ukrainian drones. They are changing the course of the war. Would you agree?
Yes. It should be noted that, according to Keith Kellogg, the Ukrainian defense industry has demonstrated incredible innovation. Moreover, the United States has stated that Ukraine's defense industry is a world leader in the production of unmanned aerial vehicles. Kellogg pointed out that every era has had its own military innovations. These are, respectively, battleships, aircraft carriers, fighter jets, and tanks. And now the Ukrainian side has introduced global innovations. We're talking about UAV technologies here. And according to Kellogg, everything has changed dramatically. Moreover, this is about the scaling up of UAVs by Ukrainian companies. At the moment, according to Russian estimates themselves, the Ukrainian side is in the lead, both in terms of quantity and, accordingly, in terms of tactical and technical characteristics of unmanned aerial vehicles. And note that Kellogg's assessment actually contradicts the hysteria that was stirred up in the Western media about the supposed scaling up of drone production, but on the territory of the Russian Federation. Kellogg clearly points out, Ukraine is a leader, in fact, a global leader, not only in the production of drones themselves, but also, accordingly, in their innovative components. Let me remind you once again, at the moment, drones, for example, from the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense, have the capability to strike legitimate military targets on the territory of the Russian Federation at distances of up to 2,000 kilometers. And let me remind you, colleagues, dear viewers, just 6 months ago, we considered it a historic record for Ukrainian drones to have tactical and technical characteristics, allowing them to hit targets at a range of up to 1,000 kilometers. As we can see, in just 6 months, there has been a dramatic change in the capabilities of Ukrainian drones, and most notably, the change in their tactical and technical characteristics has had a serious impact on the economic situation of the occupying country. Let me remind you, according to estimates from the Russian side itself, as a result of Ukrainian drone strikes, more than 20% of Russian oil refineries have either partially or completely halted their production cycle. In my opinion, this is the most striking characteristic of the successful work of the Ukrainian defense industry.
Additionally, it's interesting to find out just how inconvenient and off-script the creation of the latest Ukrainian missiles has been for the Russian occupiers in their so-called special military operation, especially since, as practice has shown, these missiles are capable of striking military targets deep behind enemy lines.
Yes, we're talking primarily about the development of Ukraine's ballistic missile program. This includes, accordingly, the long-range Neptune with a strike range of up to 1,000 kilometers. There's also the Sapsan Operational Tactical Complex with a target range of up to 500 kilometers, and the modernized S-200 surface-to-air missile system. But most importantly, it's the strike capability, specifically the ballistic missiles known as Flamingo. Their technical specifications, up to 3,000 kilometers in range. What's especially noteworthy is that the plant for producing solid fuel for Ukrainian ballistic missiles will be located outside the reach of Russian strike capabilities. And let me remind you of another very noteworthy point. The German government has allocated $1.7 billion to the Ukrainian ballistic missile program, which is a significant investment in Ukraine's defense industry. Moreover, this expands Ukraine's ability to strike legitimate military targets on the territory of the Russian Federation. Let me remind you of the first successful tests of the Flamingo, a strike on legitimate military targets in occupied Crimea. This was about the FSB border outpost, where 6 boats of the Russian occupation army were destroyed, along with the permanent deployment points of their personnel.
And Russian war correspondents admit that the so-called special military operation has failed. What suddenly changed their opinion about the so-called special military operation and its so-called goals?
The point is that Russian war correspondents are forced to admit that, at this point, now, in fact, the 4th year of the war, the Russian Federation has not achieved not only its so-called strategic goals like denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine, but more importantly, not even its tactical level objectives. This is basically an open secret, and accordingly, this is a change in rhetoric. And this change in rhetoric is connected to the failure of the Russian Federation's foreign policy course. What we're talking about is that the proposal from the Russian dictator for a so-called territorial exchange, specifically the possibility of returning the temporarily occupied territories of Kharkiv and Sumy regions to Ukraine in exchange for Ukrainian territories, namely those controlled by the defense forces of Ukraine and Donbass, has completely failed. And it failed not because of external factors, but solely thanks to Ukrainian efforts. This is the result of successful actions by the defense forces of Ukraine in both the Sumy and Kharkiv regions. Let me remind you of the latest statements from the Ukrainian president about the actions of the defense forces of Ukraine in the Sumy region, which have essentially put an end to the Russian Führer's wet dreams of advancing deeper into the Sumy region. According to the Ukrainian president, 2 more Ukrainian settlements have been deoccupied. We're talking about Konstantinovka and Novaya Konstantinovka. And at this point, the conditions have been created to push Russian occupation forces out of the Sumy region. In other words, there is no actual control over Ukrainian territory or the creation of any so-called buffer zone. Moreover, even the same military correspondents are forced to admit the objectives of the special military operation, namely preventing the expansion of NATO's borders near the Russian Federation, have failed. We're talking about new members joining NATO, namely Finland and Sweden, which has resulted in the extension of the shared border, meaning the border between Russia and the NATO bloc by 2,600 kilometers. Now, the length of the border is exactly that figure. And this is yet another foreign policy and military defeat for the Russian Federation. And most importantly, it's the 4th year of the war, and the occupiers haven't even managed to accomplish tactical level objectives, namely the complete occupation of Donetsk region. Let me remind you, dear viewers, 33% of Donetsk region's territory remains under the control of Ukraine's defense forces. And over the past week, Ukraine's defense forces have carried out a series of brilliant counteroffensive operations, and what's more, on several fronts at once. In the Pokrovsk direction, 2 settlements have been liberated, Novoekonomikne and Udakny, and accordingly, in the Dobrpilia direction, another settlement has been liberated by units of Ukraine's defense forces. We're talking about the settlement of Pankivka, and in total, during the period of active fighting in the Dobrpilia direction over the past month, 7 settlements have been liberated, not including the most recent one.
Thank you, Dmytro, for joining our broadcast. Dmytro Snyrev, military and political analyst.
Subscribe to UATV English and stay updated on the most important events, top news from Ukraine and all over the world, in-depth analysis, exclusive reports and interviews, all on hand in our channel. Join our community of viewers and stay tuned.